Every property deal starts with the acquisition. And like I always say, the one thing you can't change in the deal is the price you buy at. And today we've got my good mate Chris here with me. Chris has found thousands of sites up and down the country. You've found sites that have got planning on for £350 million worth of development. So today we're going to run through the 5 steps that you need to start doing your own land deals. So Chris, welcome mate.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Let's get straight into the analysis.
So we kind of created a bit of a hierarchy of checks, definite attributes that a plot had to have. So for example, access is important. You need to be able to have vehicle access. The access also needs to facilitate refuse and emergency services, and also the distance of the access road is important as well when it comes to planning.
Because they need to get a fire hose down there, don't they?
Yeah, so you can use dry risers and things, but best case scenario is a refuse truck can get up to the site, turn around and come back. You need a passing place as well, depending on how the access is as well.
So the first thing is about access. You see something, first of all, that looks like a lovely plot. It's got potential, but can we access it? No good if it's like a 1 meter wide track that you've got to hike down to get to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And topography comes into that as well. So that's important, depending on the from the road, either down or up.
Yeah.
And we did a lot in Croydon. We did over the years, and that is a hilly place. And so topography has a huge effect on the viability of a plot. The shape and size of the plot is obviously important. You need to be able to fit a developable, or needs to have a developable footprint, which is enough to again make a site viable.
Exactly. So when you're looking at it, you think, all right, well, depending on the type of development I'm after, it obviously needs to be the right shape.
Yeah.
No good if it's long and narrow and you want to build a detached house.
Then once you've sort of your access, your shape, size, topography as well probably goes within that. You're then looking at the relationship between the built environment around that plot.
So you said that's the third thing.
Yeah, you've got to take into account boundaries and distance from boundaries. If it's a house, you've got a minimum depth of garden as well as area.
And overlooking.
Oh yeah, overlooking is important. So you've got to look at existing windows above ground floor level, and it's sort of, they run a 45-degree line both horizontally and vertically out. And this is to do with, one is privacy, right to privacy, but also right to light as well. Then you've got interface distances, and they equate to kind of side to side. So the existing side elevation of a building to the side of your proposed dwelling, or side to back, they have different distances, or different threshold distances that they have to be in excess of. All this 2 and 3 will basically give you the result of the developable footprint. And that's where you can start to lay down your floor plates and understand what you can get on there.
Once you've identified a possible site where you think, there's a field down there, the back of my granny's garden, that I think could be done, what's the next step? What do you check? I mean, we get on to like the due diligence bit.
Yeah, DD is, using technology, you can do this the other way around these days. So you can make sure that what you're looking for is already outside of, for example, if you want to avoid conservation areas, the challenge increases if you're within these areas, conservation A and B, greenbelt.
This is where you kind of get into sort of the more planning.
Yeah, so and these are maps, these have boundaries, so you can now access, open source maps to understand whether they lie within those areas. And there's platforms out there that can give you that information.
Yeah.
Listed buildings, what you want to knock out, and trees, a big check which cannot be automated at the minute.
So now we've done the DD, we've checked, okay, it's in a conservation area, it's not greenbelt, there's no listing it, and maybe there's a TPO or not on the trees, and we think, okay, there's still viability here. What's the next stage?
The next stage really then is understanding what you can get on that site. So, number of units, or
what's the opportunity?
Yeah, what's the opportunity? This is where you're really going to start looking towards trying to get a figure of what the GDV is, the developed value of that opportunity.
This is the key stage. I mean, for me, this is the absolute key stage, because this is where you think, what value can I actually add to this site? Here we are in the appraisal stage. This is where we talk about the numbers, the most important part of the puzzle. What are the key appraisal factors?
In order to carry out the appraisal, you need to start at the top, which is the GDV, so it's effectively called a top-down appraisal.
Gross development value.
Gross development
which is
value,
essentially
sorry.
what is the value of everything once it's developed? What are you hoping to sell the whole lot for?
Yeah. In order to get to that, from the, I suppose, block plan stage, which is where we do the jelly mold and we work out
What's the jelly mold?
So that's where we take into account all the interface distances, rights to light, and it leaves us with a weird shape that we used to call the jelly mold, developable area in there, and that's where it sits. And then within that, that's where you start to draw your floor plates.
So you have the jelly mold, you have the footprint of what you think you can build, and then you think, okay, how high can I build?
So you need to work out how many units and what the area is, the internal area is that you can, the gross area you can get. Rule of thumb for, like, if you're doing a block of flats, is probably 15% communal. So you'd look at how many stories by the area of the footprint, and then that would equal a gross internal area or gross external area, minus 15% for your internal corridors, lift shaft, whatever, stairwells. And then that gives you the net, and obviously your analysis before will be looking at pound per square foot resale values. You'll be looking at that on Rightmove, on Searchland and things.
What you're working to get at is the sale value of the net square foot that can be sold on.
So that'll equate to a number. The simple equation would be, if you've got 1,000 square foot there and you've got £500 a square foot, then you're looking at £500,000 worth of GDV, basically. That's basically where you'd start with the appraisal. And then it's just a waterfall of costs after that.
So you have your GDV at the top. So let's say, what was the example you just gave now? 500?
Yeah, so you say £500 a square foot, your research analysis is telling you that these houses on this road or these flats on this road sell for that. And then you've got 1,000 square foot of area that you can sell.
So your GDV then is 500,000.
Yeah. And then you start to strip out your costs. And a lot of people call it a waterfall. You start your acquisition costs, so your cost to get the project going, I suppose, for example, to have the under option. So if you're going to option it up, then you've got your project costs, which if you're doing planning gain would be all your planning and design costs and all your other professionals that you need to bring in. And then you've got
construction.
So even if you're selling the site on to a developer and not developing it yourself, you have to come to a figure at the end of this appraisal of what the expected build cost is, because you've got to come to a figure that works for everybody, so you know a price that you can sell it at, and it leaves you with a profit, a margin at the end of the day. So you then you've got your project costs, you've then got your development costs, which would include, for example, actually completing on the purchase of the property, your borrowing costs, construction costs, professional fees, all of that. And then you've got your sale costs as well.
So then all these items here, is what's known as the GDC, which is the gross development cost. So this is what it's going to cost you to execute on the development. And then, of course, what's left is the difference between the two numbers.
Oh, and also in here, if you are selling it on, you have to put in a developer margin, because the developer's not going to do this out of the goodness of their heart. They're going to want to make money as well.
You have to factor in, if you're selling it on to a developer, you have to factor in the developer's margin.
It does change depending on desperation of sites, but I would put 20% in as a margin based off of their developed value. So with all that considered, that then leaves you a number at the end, which hopefully won't have a minus at the beginning of it. That is then your margin. And within these are a whole host of costs, which we could go into detail another time on.
So once you identify an opportunity, the next step is outreach, right? And this is the bit that, is the meat and two potatoes of this video. So you found a site, you've done some basic analysis on it, you've figured out what your opportunity is, and now you've got to contact the landowner. How do we best do that?
Yeah, well, computers and I suppose rules of thumb only get you so far. They can get you to identify something that you like the look of. But the reality is in this country is that you've got these gatekeepers that are mostly private individuals that you need to persuade to part with their land, which is obviously some of the most precious things that most individuals own. It is about getting in touch with them, getting connected with them.
And what's the best way to do that?
Before we started to build technology, even going direct to landowner, we used to just have a network of agents. Thousands of cups of coffee every year in and around London and the southeast for us used to result in a sprinkling of good sites and a lot of bad ones. It always frustrated me because you can't control that. And I don't know whether it's good advice, but for me, with business, the obsession's always been to try and control as many elements as possible. This business planning gain is you lose a lot of control when you submit your planning. It's out of your control effectively. And so it was really hard to plan on growth for a year, or how much money you need to raise, or resource that you need to get that year, by just waiting, just being passive and just waiting for sites to come to you after schmoozing with a guy for 6 months.
You're saying the old school way was to network with agents?
It really was, yeah. We then changed, and I started to do direct to landowner back in sort of 2010.
A good old fashioned letter.
It was. We used to have, it sounds a bit sexist now, but you're called the mail out girls. 5 ladies that used to do hundreds or thousands of letters, hundreds a week.
Obviously, we're talking about scaling here now, but in your operations, but if someone here wanted to find a site and they think there's a potential over there, the best way to start is to send them a letter.
Yeah.
And you say in that letter who you are, you think there's opportunity there, and then do you invite them to discuss it, right? You don't really lay it out, do you, in the letter? You say, let's get together and have a chat.
No, and I think my advice from experience, and we've done a lot. We ended up being having a marketing department that solely dealt with this. Less is more in a lot of ways. And I'm no marketing expert, but in terms of landowner marketing, we have a lot of experience. You just want them to pick up the phone and call you.
Yes, you want them to call you. Yeah. That's what you want. You want the letter is to get the call to action is to chat is what you want. The good thing about chat is that you can, in a way, you can find out what is it that works for them, because are they thinking of selling? Do they never want to move? Do they just want to release some equity, from the sale of the thing, or do they want a JV, or will they tell you that they've had 100 letters already?
And every deal's different, every scenario is different. This is the thing with properties, it's so unique, and every scenario, every owner's unique. And so with the letter, you want to not lie, but you want to keep it open, I would say, and relatively vague. The chances are they'll pick up the phone because they're interested. It's something that's caught their eye. It needs to convey that you know what you're doing, that you have experience, or if you don't have experience, just don't lie, and don't put that you don't have experience, just leave it out.
The thing is, anyone can do this. Anyone can send a letter. I don't even know what a stamp costs nowadays, but
yeah.
What is it, 50p?
It's more than that.
But you just got to send a letter. You can even hand deliver it there, and it's free. The point is that that's what it takes. And then the goal is a chat to find out what it is, what are their motivations.
Absolutely. And I think with any negotiation, in a situation like that, where you've got coming together of 2 parties, you need to look at this as it's mutually beneficial, because it is. And that's why they've contacted you, because they're interested. You want to basically go on a fact-finding mission. Ideally face-to-face, it's way better, and people undervalue that. In the not too distant future, the value of face-to-face, people are going to realize actually it's way more valuable than we thought it has been for the last.
Also, because a lot of the clients that you are buying land from are typically a bit older. Like the ones that we've done together, straight as soon as they got in touch, it was a quick call. You first had a chat with them, then I had a chat with them, and then I went and had a face-to-face. That was where you really got into and form a relationship, because you need to form a relationship.
You understand who the stakeholders are, because in some cases, often, yes, the owner of the property might be the elderly couple or the husband or wife, but also they'll have sons and daughters and other family members that have an interest in this as well, emotional or otherwise.
They've often been promised the land, or this, and so it's a decision. It's often actually it's passed down to them, isn't it?
Absolutely. So this is part of the legacy of the parents, and so it's really important to, if you can, create a relationship with them and understand what their motivations are. So I think that's where face-to-face is super important.
I really like that element, about making deals. That's what I like about property as well. When you make something, because like you say, it's about mutual benefit. What is it that they want? It's not always just money. For me as well, what I find the biggest thing is just trust. Normally, all of these arrangements involve time, because you're going to agree with them to say, look, I want to take the next year or so, or 2 years or 3 years to add value to your site. So you need them to trust you and commit those years to you for the benefit they get. Of course, they don't lose anything, because time is the only thing they lose. So it is a lot about trust.
Yeah, it really is. And all within that, you've just got to communicate well. A lot of people will be doing this by themselves, a one-man band. So you've got to be set up, and you've got to have a system in place that can help you. And there's no excuse these days. It's too easy to stay in contact with someone. So yeah. It's very important. Otherwise, the trust starts to go.
Yeah. And then, of course, the next stage, let's talk about execution then.
when I started using options was when I think I was involved in a deal that had an option agreement on it. You're not purchasing the property, it's basically a legal agreement, legally binding agreement that is registered on the land registry title, where you have the option to purchase the land for a finite time.
So for example, you have the right for the next 2 years to buy the property for a certain price. That gives you almost like a 2-year exclusivity period to go and add value on the site. So your motivation is that whatever price you've agreed to buy the site for, you want to make the site worth more than that, because that creates your margin. Yeah. There's also a promotion agreement.
Yeah, promotion agreement, although it's tricky to make them work on small sites.
Yeah, big
where
stuff,
you've
isn't
got
it?
low yield. So what you're doing there is it's a bit like a joint venture with the landowner. You're saying you put up the land and commit to a time period, and we will put in all our expertise, intellectual property, and we'll pay all costs to unlock a planning gain on this site. Whatever that is, we will then market that for sale, promote the site in the local plan also. This is if it's a large site, but we'll market the site for sale. And then when we sell, we will take costs out, our costs, plus then we will take a percentage of the net returns and you will receive the rest. Often it's weighted heavily in the landowner's favor, but you could do the deal wherever you can do the deal, really.
I mean, the next one, which is a common one, is a JV, which is obviously stands for joint venture. For example, we're looking at one at the moment where in Hampshire, where I think we're going to go with that as the best strategy, where you say to them, look, they're quite involved in the whole thing. They know their site has potential. They want to move on, but they want to maximize the value, but they don't want to commit all the funding to it. So you might say to them, look, your property is worth 1 million. Okay, we will come up with all the costs to obtain planning or whatever it might be, and then we'll sell the site on or develop it ourselves. But whatever is worth above 1 million, we split 50-50, and that is a no risk, no loss option for the landowner. And of course, us as the developer, the only money we risk is the money we spend on planning.
These agreements, the great thing about these agreements compared to buying a property outright is that you don't have the purchase costs. And obviously these days, as we know, with stamp duty and things, the levies on acquisition is high.
That's the next one, is an outright purchase, and we can probably do a whole nother video on strategies to make that simple, but we're getting a bit more in depth now on that one. But
so this options are great because
cost is only really around 2 or 3K.
Yeah, it's a relatively simple legal document, so it's relatively cheap to do and get something under option and get control. The biggest risk on it is that you agree the wrong price, the wrong strike price basically.
Yeah.
Or you run out of time. It's all about what you buy deals outright. So you've got to, this is where you have to do your homework. Whereas a promotion agreement, you're not agreeing that completion price or that sale price. You're just saying that you're gonna, whatever the returns are, you're gonna then split a profit share. So very ambiguous in terms of the return, the project, what you might get on there, what you might not. An option agreement, you have to be very careful. But with an option on small sites, it works well because usually you're either gonna get one house or no house. And you've got to, like we said before, you've got to work it off the worst case scenario on your yield and what you're gonna get.
If someone wanted to get started on this, what kind of software would you recommend using?
Basically, there's a lot now these days, a lot of tools that have been opened up, a lot of platforms. Open source data is better than it ever has been, and it's only going to get better. Searchland, I would say, is the best site for general land identification and appraisal for this type of sort of small residential site, maybe even the larger stuff as well, major application stuff, but certainly for sort of residential opportunities. But it's still a lot of trawling, so still a lot of just looking around like you would on Google Maps. The neat thing is though, it overlays other data sets, like such as land registry, so you can see your title boundaries.
Yeah, so land registry is mega, and also that's the way, we should mention, that's the way that you get the contact details for the landowner.
Yeah, absolutely. It's gone up, unfortunately, from £3 to £7 overnight recently for title register and title plan. You don't need the title plan, but you need to know who owns it if it's privately owned.
And what about then if you're searching in a new area and you want to understand like how much can I get per square foot here? What's the house going for? What's the flat going for? Again,
Searchland does offer some, it does drag in some data on that, and it can help you, but in my experience, I've found it to be missing a bit and not as accurate as if you pull together other from other sites. There's a plugin on Rightmove and I cannot remember for the life of me what it's called.
Okay.
I find this super handy because
Yeah, you've got to know your values.
yeah, first of all, it gives you a history of the property that you might have clicked on Rightmove of its marketing price. So it shows you as and when, or when and what it got reduced by. So you can see if it's sitting there stagnant. And then on the right-hand side, it gives you everything from Airbnb rates to rental rates to yields to values. It's really handy and it's relatively accurate, but all of this stuff you have to take with a pinch of salt, because these guys, as we were, you feed in data, large data sets into these.
But it's great when you're doing desktop analysis, isn't it? I mean, obviously when you're getting further into another stage, you're going to be on the ground, you're going to be going and talking to agents, you're going to be looking all over online to see what is actually sold on that street.
Absolutely. So it gives you that sort of like first pass, you can get a good understanding, and you'll learn to lay down your own rules of thumb in terms of what's going to work, what's not with resale values and things. There's still definite value though in knowing a geographic area intimately.
There's no shortcuts really. You need to know your patch.
Yeah, quite. I mean, we did a lot in Croydon. It was like the perfect scenario where they'd adopted the planning policy to letter of the law, so we could design algorithms around it and automate it. And we thought there'd be other places in the country that would do that. And we spent a year doing loads of data analysis and searching and talking and networking to find it. It didn't exist. And we made the decision that we had to find other places, but we had to have a different requirements. We had to set our parameters differently. But we only did one at a time. So we learnt it, created a network, met people, shoe leather basically, just walking to meet people in those areas, understand the housing stock.
So should we look at one of the most recent ones that we just did?
Yeah, it's Aldous Road.
So Aldous Road, had a road running down here, and then there were plots going all the way down the street like this, right? And then we saw this house here. All the houses along the front of the street, weren't they?
Yeah, basically the plot we identified, or our algorithms identified initially, was that we found an anomaly on the road, underdeveloped plot where we felt, or computer felt, there was an opportunity for land intensification.
So by that you mean, you could see here that, all these houses here have the street line is that the houses are located at the front of the plot with large rear gardens. And our plot had a house right in the middle, even facing a different direction.
It did, right in the middle, and also much smaller in terms of plot to build ratio. So
the plot was larger, and the house was smaller.
And the plot was wider. This is something else that our systems, that we created our systems to do, was to identify oversized plots as well. So it ran our oversized plot algorithm, and it identified that this was about 50% or something, 40% wider than the other plots.
And I mean, oversized plot is always opportunity.
Yeah.
So on this one, we saw the opportunity that, firstly, we noticed that the neighbor had done this, right? So the neighbor had cut their land in two like this and had divided through to the back and had built another house. But then our option, where we found, was that our proposal was to do a backland development, right? So we thought the opportunity was to build a driveway up here and have a house at the back to match the neighbors. But then, because the plot is wider, the opportunity was for two houses with access like that. And that's where the opportunity comes in, because understanding that we can get double the amount of return because of the width of the plot.
That's right, yeah. And we also found recent precedents on an adjacent road where they'd done something similar, not with the rear plot. Our plot was bigger, but they'd split, so we could see that there was a working example that had happened in the last couple of years.
There's a calculation that we do, isn't there, about, like you were talking about, the built ratio, about how much land there is versus how much is built on that land.
There is. I mean, in terms of small plots and backland, we came to the conclusion, after looking through thousands of sites examples, using precedents was more useful than setting a generalized rule of thumb. So we would look on the street, on that side of the street, and we would look within a certain radius or distance from the plot, the ratio between land and building, and also whether there was any existing backland development, not including cul-de-sacs and things like that, looking for 1 to 2 unit precedents, because that gives you quite a weighting when you go to planning and you want to engage with the council on trying to get consent on that, as well as policy as well. But from a geographic or GIS perspective, when looking at land top down, as in from a satellite, this is what we were looking for. And so we're looking for a ratio which is obviously less than what it is in neighbouring properties on that side of the road. The reason we do that side of the road is because it can often change from one side to the other. There can be...
It does sound very complicated, right? But it's not really rocket science. It's not that difficult. Like you're saying, always look for precedents, even though the planners, I know they don't have to, precedents actually mean that much, they don't have to do it, but precedent shows there is opportunity because someone's done it before, and it's likely you can do it again.
Absolutely. It is just a set of rules of thumb. You know, you're looking for red flags, you're looking for reasons to not do the opportunity as much as you are looking...
What are some of the red flags?
Trees can, these days especially, trees can be a very big...
So on our one here, there was a blanket TPO on this section here, tree protection order. And it was a blanket TPO because the council, I guess, hadn't been bothered to pinpoint. So those are trees that the council have put an order on to protect them. You cannot cut these trees down. So what we did is we had a tree survey done, and it found out that the actual 2 trees in question were like here and here.
Yeah.
You know, so we altered the scheme so as not to disturb those trees. So that was the first red flag, but we thought that's fine, we can get around that.
Yeah, we found a solution. The concern was whether we could get a second access in. So we made sure that we had a plan B, which was to use the existing access.
And it's important to always have a backup plan. If your entire development hinges on one key factor and you don't have the solution to avoid that, you know, you can quickly come unstuck.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, you've got to work off worst case. And if it works on worst case, then it's worth proceeding with. So yeah, that was on that site. To find this site, we used most of our suite of algorithms. You know, precedence was one, backland precedence, access. And we could have had one thing that we do as a check, and our algorithms do, is that they check for rear access as well. So you could have, we have something called direct access, rear access, and then what we call garage. Direct access is up the side of the existing building, so you don't have to knock down the existing house here, for example, and go up the side into the plot. Rear access is if you can access it from a road to the rear, which is often the case. And then garage is if removal of an existing garage will give you access up the side.
Yeah.
And so often in a deal, we would go to the landowner and say, one thing we would have to do to unlock this opportunity is to relocate your garage, and we'd be happy as part of the contract to rebuild that in another location or remove it altogether. And this one was convenient enough that we could get up the side because of the location of the existing house.
All right, so there you have it. 5 key steps to doing your own land deals. Thanks so much, Chris. We covered some topics. One particularly meaty one is the appraisal section. And I think we'll do another video on how we get into the nuts and bolts of that.
Sounds like a plan.
Subscribe to the newsletter, the 100 unit channels, and follow us on YouTube. Thanks very much for watching. See you in the next one.